Drink photography is one of the most fun and rewarding kinds of food photography out there. It's a chance to play around with props, have fun with colour and explore composition techniques. However, photographing drinks does come with a few challenges, so I've put together my 7 top tips to help make it a little bit easier and to get you creating magazine-style drink photos in no time. Okay, so my first tip is to use complementary colours to really help them pop. Complementary colours sit opposite each other on the colour wheel, like red and green, and they really help things stand out from each other. Drinks themselves can be fairly one-dimensional in terms of colour, with the whole drink often being one colour, so bringing a complementary colour into the garnish can really help add a bit of interest. In this grapefruit drink, the scene is really largely orange focused, so I brought in some strong green in the mint garnish to balance it out a bit. It really helps give the scene a bit of a punch and stops it looking bland. Now, don't take this as gospel that you always need complementary colours in drink photography. I love me a good analogous colour palette sometimes, but most of the time a little complementary kick goes a long way. Next up is a composition technique called the rule of odds. So the rule of odds states that when you're including a group of subjects in your photo, an odd number rather than an even number will produce a more interesting and more visually pleasing composition. This is because when we're looking at a group of subjects, our brain likes to try to group them together, and with an even number, that often means we tend to end up with 2 groups in our mind, which can make our photos look a little bit too organized. If you want to learn more about the rule of odds specifically, I made a whole other video about it, which I'll link up here. Drink photography is the perfect chance to put the rule of odds into practice. So try adding 3 or 5 main glasses in your composition and incorporate diagonals and triangles into your composition. By having an odd number of subjects in your photo, you can more easily highlight one as the main subject by placing it in a powerful place in your composition and using a lower aperture, so a wider aperture, to really help it stand out. In this image, I used a triangle shaped layout and used diagonals in the garnishes and the placement of the lime wedges to really help frame the main drink at the front. Okay, my next tip is all about lighting. When shooting drinks, lighting is probably one of the most fun aspects, but also one of the most tricky areas to perfect. Drink photography can be a hotbed for dreaded reflections and bright spots where the light is just bouncing right off the side of the glass and back into the lens. A good way to counteract this is to backlight your drink photos, like in this example. So in this photo, my light source is my large 120cm octagonal softbox, and I've got it directly behind and slightly above the drink, just so it's pointing down ever so slightly. And by placing it up and angling it down a bit, I still get the benefit of backlighting, which creates that nice glow through the drink, but it also prevents the shadows at the front from being too long and distracting. Backlighting works particularly well for bubbly drinks like this because there's quite a bit of texture going on, and backlight loves texture. So it's a great way to capture all of that detail. And when you're side lighting drinks, try and position your light slightly towards the back of the scene to avoid bright reflections on the side. Next up is another lighting tip, and that is to experiment with hard light. When it comes to food photography, most of the time we're bombarded with the message that soft light is better. We're told to create soft shadows, diffuse the light to create gentle curves and beautifully illuminated scenes. But luckily, hard light seems to be having a moment right now, and I am loving it. Sometimes hard light can be stunning, and I have found drink photography the perfect place to take some photos using pure, undiffused light to capture the textures on glasses, creating almost a prism effect. For this photo, I positioned my light quite high above my subject and angled it down diagonally. The further away your light is from your glasses, the longer your shadows will be, so you can play around with moving your light to get the effect you want. And the smaller your light source is, the harder your shadows will be as well, so you can play around with direct sunlight through a window, a bare flash head, or even a small beauty dish to create a semi-hard light look. Next up is a food styling tip to help give you that frosted, ice cold, crisp, just out of the fridge look for your drink photos. A food photography set is not the ideal place to keep things cold and crisp, so maintaining the perfect level of condensation on the side of a glass is pretty much impossible, especially when you're working with artificial lights, which can be a bit hot. Well, there's a simple trick to create this, and it comes in the form of a mix of water and glycerin. So all you're going to do is simply fill a Mr. spray bottle. I use an old toner bottle, which I thoroughly washed once it was empty, with 50% water and 50% glycerin, which I just bought at a baking store. Mix it up really well and then spray on your room temperature glass. You're going to be left with the perfect condensation effect that won't fade or drip away no matter how long your glass is out for. If you want more food styling tricks, then head to the link in the description to download my free food styling guide with 10 of my top tips I use as a food photographer. I also have this little mix on hand when I'm working with fruit and vegetables. It also adds that kind of freshly washed, crisp look to them, and it's really easily washed off at the end. It's completely food safe, so you can still use the produce. Okay, next up, let's talk about ice. Ice is an essential element for a lot of drinks photography, but obviously a very perishable ingredient. In a hot styling room, you probably have a few minutes with an ice cube before it disappears, denying you the opportunity to get that perfect ice-filled shot. So a prop that comes in super handy is a bag of fake ice cubes. They can be really very realistic looking and will serve you really well through your drink photography shoots. So often I'll use these little acrylic cubes for staging my shoot and then bring in the real ice at the last minute for the real thing. So down below I've linked these budget-friendly acrylic cubes. I think I just got these on Amazon. But if you want a real lifelike professional look, then Trengrove ice is the best you can get. I don't have any of this myself yet, but it is on my dream prop list. I'm saving up and waiting for that perfect drink shoot. Garnishes are a fun way to add life and colour to your drink photography as well. As I mentioned earlier, using complementary colours in your garnishes is a powerful way to add a pop of colour and interest to your drinks, and you can often do this with herbs and leaves. In this grapefruit cocktail though, I dehydrated some lemon slices in an oven on a really low temperature for a few hours to create an interesting texture and something a little bit different than a traditional lemon wedge. And in this whiskey cocktail, I bruleed the orange slices by sprinkling on a little bit of caster sugar and just grilling them in a frying pan until they were caramelized. I love looking at cocktail recipe books or Pinterest to find new interesting ways to garnish my drinks. Other options for garnishes could be adding a salt or sugar rim to your glasses, getting creative with the shape of some of the citrus peels, slicing berries, the list goes on. The most important thing when you're choosing a garnish though is that it makes sense for your drink. So try and kind of tie it in with what you've got going on. So there you have 7 ways you can try to spice up your drink photography. Don't forget to download my free 10 food styling tips PDF down below to help you take your food styling to the next level, and I will see you in the next video. Why have you stopped? Hello. Well, there's a simple trick to create this. There we go.